The energy of the mind is the essence of life. Aristotle. The Greeks had an immense advantage over the Persians, one that would later aid them in their ultimate victory against them in 449 BC. This advantage that the Greeks possessed was that they were not only strong physically, but their mental capacity, vigor, grit, and overall drive to succeed made them the ultimate opponent for the ever-growing Persian Empire. They, the Greeks, may have been small in number in comparison to that of the immense Persian army, but their inclination to succeed powered their constant but soon ending animosity toward their enemies. Even with their advantage, the Greeks still faced a plethora of different difficulties and hardships. The Ionian Revolt was one of the first of the many battles/revolts between the Greeks and the Persians. Aristagoras, ruler of the Ionian city Miletus, longed for the city of Naxos. He tried desperately to get help from surrounding cities, but failed in doing so. Fearing reprisal from Darius I, the Persian emperor at the time, and Artaphernes, he provoked a rebellion. In order to get his rebellion underway, Aristagoras encouraged the Ionians to remove their Persian leaders. In response to Aristagoras' encouragement, many cities in the vicinity rebelled and overthrew their leaders. Knowing that word would travel fast due to the numerous accounts of Persian leaders being overthrown, Aristagoras traveled to Sparta and appealed to King Cleomens for aid. The Spartan leader was hesitant to aid Aristagoras, as it would mean that his army would have to travel a great distance in order to aid and reinforce the Ionians. Later, King Cleomens declined the request to aid, making Aristagoras panic and scramble to Athens in order to search for someone to aid him with his rebellion. The Athenians, fearing an unavoidable attack from the Persians, decided to support Aristagoras and sent 20 triremes along with 5 retria. At first, when the Greeks trudged into the city, they were met with little resistance, but as they marched further, they were greeted by Artaphernes, the ruler of Sardis. He was guarding the citadel, the Golden Horn. The Ionians set the entire city ablaze as they were unable to capture the citadel, and then retreated to Cephissus. Persian troops met the Greeks in Cephissus and slaughtered most of their troops. Those that were left fled to surrounding cities. One of the first battles in the war between the Greeks and the Persians was the Battle at Marathon. The Persian army was commanded by Artaphernes, nephew of Datis and Darius. Artaphernes was sent into Greece because of the influence he had on the growing kingdom of Persia. Nearby Persian cities were being encouraged by the Greeks to revolt and win their freedom from Persia. Artaphernes made his way through Greece and eventually made it to Marathon, which they would conquer and then move on to Athens. As soon as the Athenians caught wind of this plan, they sent a runner to Sparta to request aid. The Spartans promised that they would send troops to help the Athenians, but not until Carneia, a religious festival of Sparta, was over. At this point, the Greeks had many different options. They could fortify themselves inside their walls and prepare for a siege. They could blockade a nearby mountain pass that the Persians would have to pass through, or they could send their army to Marathon to confront the Persians there. The Athenians chose to send their troops to Marathon, as they got most of their supplies from nearby fields that would be easy to cut off, and the Persian army had enough troops that could simply attack until the mountain pass was overrun. When the Athenian army had made its way to Marathon, they sighted the Persian army. Both armies delayed the fighting for 9 days. The Athenians were hoping that they could stall long enough for the Spartans to come to their side, as the Spartan people were known for their fierce fighting and would demoralize the Persian troops. The Persians were thinking that every day that the Athenians waited, faced with an army that could have been more than 3 times their size, would cause their morale to plummet. The Athenians soon realized that they could not wait for the Spartans to join them. The Athenian general Callimachus and Miltiades were both excellent strategists. Miltiades had even fought in the Persian army and knew how it was structured and how it was vulnerable. The Greeks arranged their forces so that the strongest fighters were on either side, while the weaker fighters were in the middle. The Persian army, on the other hand, was arranged in the opposite way, with the strongest veterans in the middle and the weaker fighters on both sides. The Persian forces in the middle cut through the center of the Greek army easily, but at a great cost. The Greek forces dominated the sides of the Persian army. The less experienced fighters quickly retreated, and instead of chasing after the fleeing men, the Greek soldiers turned to help the center of their forces. The remainder of the Persian army was attacked on 3 sides. They fled to their fleet, with the Greeks close behind. Many Athenians chased them back to their boats, dragged the ships ashore, and annihilated those on board. This battle broke the illusion Persian had been proclaiming that its armies were invincible, bolstered the morale and determination of other Greek city-states and led to Athens building one of the most powerful navies in history. The Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BC, was fought by a strategic alliance of Greek city-states led by Sparta and the Persian Empire of Xerxes I. The battle itself took place at the Pass of Thermopylae. Fighting between the Greeks and the Spartans and the Persians lasted 3 days, but the entire battle itself lasted 7 days due to stalling from both sides. The Greeks were immeasurably outnumbered by the Persians. A Greek force of about 7,000 men ventured north to block the pass in the summer of 480 BC. They were about to face a Persian army of about 500,000 men, the largest army they had ever faced before. The Spartans' phalanx formation's strong armor and weapons and fight skills were no match for the multitude of men standing in front of them. At first, after the archers shot their arrows at the strong, tight-knit phalanx, this had barely, if not any, impact on the assemblage of Spartans. Next came the rest of the Persian warriors. At first, they seemed to be no match for the Spartans. That was the case for about a day, and this greatly angered the Persian god king Xerxes. On the second day, the Spartans were completely annihilated. This was due to the traitor by the name of Epauletus. Perhaps one of the most important battles during the war between the Greeks and the Persians was the Battle of Salamis. In 480 BC, the Greek summer was interrupted by the invasion of Persian troops from the north, led by Xerxes, and accompanied by a large fleet of ships. The Greeks mustered a force to challenge the invaders and their naval fleet. The Persian fleet advanced through Greece, confronted the Greek navy allied with the Peloponnesians, and defeated them. After that, the fleet moved on to the ports of nearby city-state Salamis. On land, Xerxes and his forces pushed through Athens, attacking and burning any cities that stood in his way. While the city of Athens fell, the Greek army was not defeated yet, and promptly fortified themselves on the Isthmus of Corinth in order to defend the Peloponnesus. This could be considered both a wise and foolish move. The isthmus was a strong position, but could be taken easily if Xerxes decided to send his troops to cross the waters of the Saronic Gulf. Because of this danger, many of the allied Greek leaders voted that the fleet be moved to the isthmus to defend them. However, the Athenian leader Themistocles decided that the fleet was more use in Salamis. Themistocles decided on this course because he realized that the smaller Greek force would have a better chance of defending themselves and weakening the Persian force by using the confined body of water around the island of Salamis, and because the majority of the Greek fleet was compromised of Athenian ships, he was able to proceed with his plan instead of bringing the fleet to him. Xerxes realized that he had to deal with the Greek fleet now, because he passed them and was surrounded. He was not, however, a fool. He realized that his ships would be at severe disadvantage in the waters around Salamis, and attacking would result in heavy casualties if he engaged the Greeks in the strait. Xerxes began to move his armies towards the isthmus, hoping that the Greeks' Peloponnesian allies might desert them. However, Themistocles caught wind of what Xerxes was thinking. He sent a servant of his to Xerxes, claiming that the Athenians wanted to betray their Greek allies and send with the Persians. The servant also claimed that the Peloponnesians were planning to depart that night. Believing this, he had his fleet block the straits of Salamis and Megara, the only other exit the Greek fleet could take. Xerxes' forces began to advance on the Greeks. They were deployed with the Peloponnesian allies on the right, Ionian Greeks on the left, and the rest of the forces in the center. However, while Xerxes had expected the Greeks to be disjointed and divided, they were prepared and ready with the Athenian forces on the left, the Spartan forces on the right, and the other Athenians in the middle. The Greeks demolished the first line of the Persian fleet, backing up and drawing them further into the shallow waters. Then, with the morning wind in their sails, the Greeks pressed the attack. The first Persian lines were driven back into the lines behind them, like a set of naval dominoes. The high winds caused the Persian ships to have low maneuverability, and as such, they were easy targets for the quick Greek ships. When the Phoenician commander was killed, the Phoenicians were left without a leader and quickly fell apart and attempted to flee. The Greeks then continued to attack the Persian fleet, pushing through the center and cutting their fleet in half. The Ionian Greeks were the last to flee, but they were eventually overcome by the Greeks and had to retreat. Many of the Persian fleet rammed their own allied ships in chaos and terror as they tried to retreat to Phalerum, closely followed by the Greek fleet. After 30 more years of fighting, led by the Athenians, the newly formed Delian League went to the offensive to free the Ionian city-states on the Anatolian coast. The Delian League was a unification of roughly 160 Greek city-states, led by Athens, which was founded in 477 BC. The Delian League was founded after the Battle of Plataea, near the end of the Second Persian invasion of Greece, in order to build a stronger force to confront the Persian Empire and defend against their expansion into Greece. The League had mixed success, and in 449 BCE, the Peace of Callias finally ended the hostilities between Athens and the allies in Persia.